Hello there! In this video we're going to see finite dependent clauses, but first let's analyze and revise some key concepts regarding dependent clauses. A dependent clause is a sentence constituent which cannot stand alone as a complete idea. Unlike independent clauses, dependent clauses need to be attached to longer constructions in order to be complete in meaning. Usually, these dependent clauses depend on a main clause in order to be fully understood. Let's see an example. Because I was sick is not complete in meaning. It needs further information in order to be understood. What happened because I was sick? We need some more information. But if we add an independent clause to this dependent clause, then the dependent clause can be functional, as in the following example. I left because I was sick. In this case, now this dependent clause has a function which is the one of an adverbial, giving us information related to the reason why this person left. How do we recognize a dependent clause or a subordinate clause? Well, there are some signals we can follow or we can consider to find subordinate or dependent clauses. Those are clauses beginning with a subordinator, a that word, or a WH word. Another thing we can consider are those clauses beginning with a non-finite verb phrase. These non-finite verb phrases are those which lack modality or tense, and they can be to infinitives, ed clauses, ing clauses, or verbless clauses. Dependent clauses can be either finite or non-finite. They can show tense and modality or not. But in this video, we're going to focus only on finite dependent clauses, and we'll classify them according to their syntactic roles within a clause or a complex sentence. Finite dependent clauses within a complex sentence can be a complement clause, an adverbial clause, a relative clause, a comparative clause, or a peripheral clause. We'll see them in close detail. Finite complement clauses are introduced by a subordinator that can be that or a WH word, and they are controlled by verbs, adjectives, nouns, or prepositions. Complement clauses are also known as nominal clauses because they can occupy the slot of a noun phrase within a clause. In brief, a complement clause can be the subject of the clause, a predicative within the clause, that this means a subject or object complement. They can be used as direct objects, or they can complement phrases like noun phrases, adjective phrases, and prepositional phrases. Let's see some examples. In this first example, we can see a finite dependent clause which begins with a subordinator of that being the subject of this clause. It's acting as the subject. The second syntactic role we'll see is the one of the object. In this case, we can see the finite dependent clause placed in the slot of an object. It's placed also after a transitive verb which is believe. Believe what? That the minimum wage would threaten their jobs. That's the direct object. Predicatives are also complement clauses, and they can be classified in subject predicative and object predicative. In the following examples, we can see finite WH complement clauses being a predicative either for a subject or for an object. In the former, we can see a WH complement clause being a subject predicative because it's placed after the copular verb be. See that this complement clause begins with a subordinator which is a WH word why. Besides, note this clause contains another WH complement clause which acts as the subject of this clause. In this case, I haven't marked this in pink because I wanted to show you the subject predicative. The latter exemplifies two object predicatives. The first begins here and ends here. This is the first dependent clause, which is signaled by a WH word, which is who, and this WH complement clause gives us information related to the object, which is us. Within that first dependent clause, we have another dependent clause, which is also signaled by the subordinator who, but this time it gives us information related to a second object, which is them. And finally, complement clauses can also be part of phrases. They can be part of noun phrases, adjective phrases, and prepositional phrases. In the first example, we can see a WH complement clause being a part of an adjective phrase. Please note that in this case, the finite dependent clause is placed after the adjective careful. In the second example, we can see a finite WH complement clause being part of a prepositional phrase. It is placed immediately after the preposition and it completes the idea of that preposition. And in the last example, we can see a finite that complement clause being part of a noun phrase. Please note this complement clause is placed after the noun fear. In this clause, fear is our head noun, and the information covered within the complement clause gives us an idea of the content of this noun. In other words, the complement clause is the fear itself. Apart from complement clauses, we can also find adverbial clauses. Adverbial clauses are normally optional elements within a clause, and they serve to give information related to a circumstance regarding an action or an event. They also convey information related to a speaker's comment, or they can serve a connected function. In these two examples, we can see different subordinators from the ones we've seen previously. One is if, that is related to a condition, and the second is although, which is a linking adverbial to show contrast or concession. Generally, adverbial clauses can be placed at the beginning, in the middle, or in the end of clauses, and they use a wide range of subordinators. In this unit, we're going to see an overall view of adverbials, but we'll see them in detail in Unit 11. Relative clauses are another kind of finite dependent clause, and they are used as noun postmodifiers to expand the meaning or the reference of a head noun. Relative clauses are placed immediately after the head noun. In addition, in relative clauses, the subordinator or WH word corresponds in meaning to the head noun. In the first example, the subordinator who replaces the men within the relative clause. We can also replace who by saying the men are armed and dangerous. In the second example, which also replaces the part of the world, but is placed in another position. We are interested in the part of the world. We'll see relative clauses in detail in Unit 9. Here we need to make a distinction between complement clauses and relative clauses because both are placed after noun phrases, but they serve different functions. Complement clauses which are placed after noun phrases give us the idea of the content in the head noun, while relative clauses, on the other hand, help us identify the head noun, and the subordinator used within the relative clause corresponds in meaning to the head noun. Comparative clauses are also finite dependent clauses which require a basis of comparison. Comparative clauses are used with adjective phrases and adverb phrases with a gradable word as their head. In these examples, we can see two gradable words which are used as the head of these phrases, either adjective phrase or an adverb phrase. In the case of the first example, we can see the word as heading the dependent clause for equal comparison and the word then heading the dependent clause for an equal comparison. Peripheral clauses is the last of finite dependent clauses, and they are used to seek for confirmation or to reestablish what somebody else has just said. These clauses are considered dependent because they need the previous declarative clause or statement in order to complete their meaning. In the first example, we can see a finite dependent clause, which is used to re-establish what somebody else has just said, which is covered in the previous declarative clause. And in the second example, we can see another finite dependent clause, which is seeking for confirmation of the previous declarative clause, which is over here. Please note that tag clauses use the opposite structure from the declarative clause. If the declarative clause is in affirmative form, the tag would be in negative form and vice versa. Okay, students, that's all for this video. Please consider when analyzing finite dependent clauses, these subordinators we were talking about previously, the ones that are part of adverbials, the ones that are part of complement clauses, or the ones that are part of relative clauses, those subordinators beginning with the word that or a WH word, and additionally consider all these syntactic roles we were talking about previously. Consider the kind of word which we are complementing or we are giving extra information within these complement clauses. For further information, please contact me. See you soon.